Welcome, loyal listeners and new listeners too. Hey, are you using military records? Do you even know how to obtain military records? As we get into part 2 of the records treasure hunt, we're going to learn all about how to do this from an expert in the field. So stick around. This is going to be really interesting and very useful.
Welcome to Nothing But the Truth, the podcast about investigations and how you can become a better detective. This is the no BS, no Hollywood nonsense real deal. Now here's your host, Detective Rom.
Welcome back, everybody. It's episode 7 of Nothing But the Truth, the podcast that helps your investigations get better by helping you become a better investigator. I'm Detective Rom, Ramesh Nyberg, retired homicide investigator, and I'm here to share my experiences, my skills and observations with you so that you'll benefit from it. And I think we got some great stuff going on today. You know, if you were with me on the last episode, we started talking about getting records, getting police records, doing background checks, and some of the things that a lot of investigators might miss during that process. So in furtherance of that, you know, this is kind of part 2 of that theme where we don't want to miss anything. And I think a lot of people overlook military records and the value of military records because maybe they really don't know how to find them and what the process is of going after them. Well, we're going to unravel that mystery today and put another tool in your toolbox. First things first, I want to just make sure you have my contact information, truth@nybergpi.com, truth@nybergpi.com. I'm also on Twitter @nybergpi. I always look forward to your feedback. I'm always looking forward to you telling me what you'd like to hear more of. So without further ado, let's get started. This was a great conversation I had with this gentleman, and I hope you'll benefit from it. So here we go. All right, my guest today, and I'm very happy that he's here, is a Maryland-based private investigator and the owner of his own investigative training group. He spent 18 years as a special agent for various government agencies. He worked in the Treasury Department, the Postal Service, and he's also a veteran of the United States Air Force and worked in the special investigations there. He worked with Army CID, credentials all over the place. And he's got a lot of experience in the military and in the world of investigations. He's also working on his doctorate degree in strategic leadership. The guy is really a pro, and his name is Derek A. Smith. Derek, welcome to Nothing But the Truth. Thanks for being here today, and how you doing?
I'm doing great, Ramesh, and thank you very much for having me today. I'm happy to be here with you.
The previous episode of this podcast, we covered a lot about getting police records and doing background checks. And one of the things I notice when I go on Facebook and I look at different Facebook groups for investigators, I see a lot of questions about how do I go about getting these types of records. And invariably, people want to know how to get military records, and that's why you're joining us today. So tell us first, what is the value of military records before we get into how to get them? Like, what kind of things can an investigator find in military records that they might not be able to get in a regular police or criminal check?
Okay, great. That's a great question. Well, first of all, when you're looking at military records, you might be looking at it for, let's say, you want to verify someone's employment or do a background check, or you might just want to find out if the person had if he's really honorably discharged, or was he dishonorably discharged, and why. And I'm saying he, but he or she. Or you might actually want to get the records of the court martial. You can get transcripts of the court martial. So just to run down a list of things you can get, of course, you can get the person's name, but you can actually find out their salary. You can get their service number if they have a service number. Most of us who serve later on have a social security number. So the social security number is available there. You can find out the different branch of services that person was in. For instance, for me, I served in the Navy, Air Force, and Army. You might not know that when you're doing your investigation.
Right.
So when you request those records, you find out that this guy served in all 3 services or more than one service, and you want to go find those records. You can get the dates of service. So if you want to verify when that person actually served, you can go back and find out the exact dates. And again, for me, with multiple services, you can find out this guy served at a particular time that you're looking for. You can get the final duty status. Where did that person serve? Let's say you're trying to track down if a person was in a certain location at a certain time. You can find out where he was based, where he served, so you can get that information and use that as part of your investigation as well.
Yeah,
You can find
that could be really valuable when you're trying to put together a timeline on where
exactly.
somebody was and their movements. Yeah.
Yes, and you being both of us being ex-law enforcement, that becomes very important for our investigation at times in law enforcement, and I'm sure for private investigators, you can lay the basis for some things you're trying to find as well. So yes, that can become important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, and before we go any further, I failed to mention thank you for your service to our country. It was obviously extensive, and I think the nation owes you a debt of gratitude for that.
I appreciate that, Ramesh. Being in the military totally changed my life, and I wouldn't be an investigator today if I had not done so. So I
Wow.
appreciate that.
Yeah. So I mean, so you got. I don't want to sidetrack, but so
Mhm.
you gained a lot of your investigative skills in these different areas of service with the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, right?
Yes. So I actually joined the military at 17 years old, straight out of high school, and I am from the South Side of Chicago, Ramesh. So that was my way out. You
Oh,
know, that,
that's a rough place.
absolutely, absolutely. And I was doing things like I'm the oldest of six boys, so I was doing things that I probably shouldn't have been doing. And joining the military was my way to go to college, number one, and change my life. Before as they always say, you end up doing something or you end up dead. In prison or dead. So that was my way out.
Wow. Yeah.
Um,
How many times, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've heard so many stories of people that reflect that same thing in their lives, that the military really got them straightened out and on the right path. That's really
Absolutely.
great.
Absolutely. And I don't regret it. People ask me all the time, do I recommend they go in the military? And I absolutely recommend it, that they
Hmm.
go in, especially if they want to go to college or pick up a skill like I did. So speaking of that skill, being from Chicago and my dealing with police and things like that, I had no desire to be in investigations. But before I went out, I was doing security work. And that security work led me to an interest kind of in law enforcement, but I didn't want to be a police officer. I wanted to be that FBI agent or DEA or whatever.
Yeah.
So I was introduced to it in the Air Force. I went to the Navy for a couple of years first, and I was a CB. So I wasn't in law enforcement in the Navy. But when I went to the Air Force, I got introduced to the special investigations, and I looked into it. And you have to go through a large process to get there, and interviews, and they have to interview your wife and make sure she's okay with it. And I became an agent. Went through the academy. We go through FLETC, Federal Law Enforcement Training Academy, and then we come back to our duty stations. And I served all over the world doing various things from investigations to protective service to undercover operations and counterintelligence. And after I finished that, Ramesh, I went to the Army Criminal Investigations Division, and actually did the same thing. Their mission, they don't do counterintelligence, but they do all the investigations. And let me tell you this, Ramesh, a base is like a city. So
Sure.
everything that you have in a city, we had rapes, murders, theft rings, gangs. Everything is on a base. You have
Sure.
thousands of
Sure.
people. So that's where I was. That's what got me to where I am today and being that investigator. And naturally, when I got out of the military, I did it as an agent, as a federal agent, and then started my own company that I have now. So that's kind of the background of how that happened, timeline
I
for it.
don't think the average person who's not been in the military, there's so many procedures and so many things that have to be followed to the letter. And it's kind of the same thing in law enforcement,
Mhm.
where when you're conducting an investigation, there's very strict guidelines as to reporting and who to report it to. When you're just a civilian private investigator, it's a big kind of open world out there, and you kind of
Yes,
almost make your own rules.
yes.
But I think the things that you learned, Derek, in the military when it comes to investigative techniques and investigative guidelines is so valuable,
Mhm.
right? I'm sure it's carried through for you.
Yeah. And let me tell you, and we had it even a little bit harder. You probably watch, if people watch NCIS and they look at those shows and they think we're cowboys out there, But but we had the UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and we had something called posse comitatus. And posse comitatus meant that we could not just go out and investigate anything; it had to have a military nexus to it. So if a guy was selling drugs or something to a military member, we can go after that drug dealer, and we can go two levels above him to get to who's
Hmm.
selling the drugs. So we had a lot of rules we had to follow. But let me tell you this: it was the best education in investigations because you had to be so on point and so strict, and know the titles and the codes and make sure everything was done the right way. And then the same thing in civilian life. You're police officer, we have to follow the rules. People think that we're out here just breaking rules sometime as law enforcement. You see a movie and they pull a wire out of their drawer and they go and, wire somebody up. There's a lot of
Right.
paperwork involved with that. It's
Right.
not that simple,
No, not at all.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, our previous guest, we had an investigator that worked a huge organized crime case and was explaining, the procedures for getting a wiretap. It's not anything like you see in Hollywood. It's a huge undertaking.
Absolutely.
But let's go back to the record. You mentioned something earlier on about court martials, so you can actually get some of the details of the court martial process and results.
Yes, you can actually get the transcripts of the actual court martial trial that took place because that becomes a public record as long as there's no Privacy Act information that's in it. And I'm going to talk about that a little later. But let me give you a couple other things that you can also get, Ramesh, real quick.
Yeah, please.
You can find out that person's final rank. You can get their awards and decorations they might have received. You see a lot of things on the internet about people with stolen valor and all that. So you can find out the actual awards and decorations that person have. But here's another thing: you can get photographs of the person when they're in the military. I told you this before, but you can get the assignments and the geographical locations. You can get if they're a commission and if they're NCO or not. You can even
Yeah,
find
that
out
could
that.
be
Oh yeah, go ahead. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
that could be like gold because I was just going to start to interrupt you, but
Hmm.
photographs sometimes can be a big deal.
Absolutely.
Sometimes attorneys will hire you on a skip trace or there's some civil suit where they got to find the person, but they have
Mhm.
no idea what they look like. They've never seen them before.
Yep.
So this
Yep.
this could be a way in.
Yes. And just a couple more things. You can find out their military education. You can find out where they actually entered service. What city did did this person come from? Chicago? And then where did he get out of the military? Like me, I separated here in the Washington, D.C. area. And the last thing, you can also find out where they were born and where they're buried if they are deceased and you need it for those purposes. So as you can see, there's a lot of information that's embedded in those records if you can get your hands on it. I'm going to tell you how to do that as we go on.
Right, that's the key, right? That's that's
That's the
that's
key.
the golden
Yes.
key. So yeah, and those types of things that you mentioned, you never know in a private investigation case what you're going to need.
Hmm.
Like sometimes the case evolves and the client comes back to you and says, "Hey, by the way, we really need to focus on this part of the information," and so you never know what you're going to need. I always tell people to try and get as much as they can.
Yes, I'll tell you this. With us, time is money, and we have to invest our time wisely. But I'd rather have too much information than not enough. I'd rather get it the first time
Oh
than have
yeah.
to go back and ask for it again.
Oh, any
You
day.
know,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
So let's get down to the nitty gritty now, Derek. Like what are the steps? Let's say I'm a PI and I've got this target that I'm looking at. I don't know that much about him, but I know enough to know that he was in, let's say, the Marine Corps, and I want to go find out what happened, where he was stationed, why he left, all those things. What do I do?
Well, first let's take a look at this. There are over 100 million records, official military personnel files. That's what we call them, OMPF, official military personnel files. That's stored in the National Personnel Records Center. And that's where all the records are going to be. That's in St. Louis, by the way, St. Louis, Missouri. So they're going to have all the records that you're going to be looking for, but how do you get those records? Now, we have something called a DD 214. And the DD 214 is the record that I was given after I left each military service that shows all the time I spent in service, my decorations, even my training and everything. But the catch to that is that you're not going to be able to get the DD 214. Now, if your client is the military person or is a wife trying to find, ex-wife or brother or sister or whatever, trying to find records
Hmm.
on that military person, they can actually get that information. But if you're just a person like a private investigator looking for that information, you're going to have to get access to that person's personnel file. And you can get the actual personnel file. It's called the official military personnel files by doing a particular request. And there's two ways you can get that request. So the first thing you can do is that you can go to the archives, the National Archives Center, all right?
Hmm.
And you want to try that first because if you go through the National Archives Center and it's online, you don't have to put in a FOIA request because the FOIA request is the second way to get records. And I get to that in just a second. But if you go to the National Personnel Records Center or through the archives, you can request a person's records through there first, and that's the first way to try. You go in, you can put in a person's name, social security number, or service number, some of those types of information that it runs you through, and they will actually do a search for the records for you. Now, you have to give a reason as to why you want those records, and they have a comment section in the online version, and also if you do a written version, there's a comment section to say why you want those records. So that's the
Okay.
first way you want to try to get the records. It's free. There's no charge for it. Even if you need it for a rush and you want to do a rush survey because you're doing your investigation, there's no cost for that. So you can get your records. Now, rush for the military. You ever heard the term "hurry up and wait" when you're dealing
Oh,
with the
sure.
military? So it's going to be a hurry up and wait because normally it's going to take about 12 weeks to even 3 months. Well, that's 3 months to process your records and get it through the process so they can send it to you. Now, of course, as an investigator, I really don't want to wait 3 months. So you can ask
Sure.
for that rush or expedited service. And it usually takes 4 to 6 weeks. That's the rush to get it typically.
Okay.
Now, if you're next to kin, let's say the person you're getting the records because it's going to be a burial or something like that. There's certain circumstances where they'll give you the records in less than 10 days. So if you use it for burial, let's say you have a client and their spouse passed away, and spouse was in the military years ago, and you want to bury that person in a military cemetery, and you need to get access to the records. Now they can get the records that way. They can get a rush service on the records, get it to them in 1 or 2 days, and that way they can go through with the burial process. So you can get it online that way.
So now, as far as the National Archives that you're describing, like
hmm
how up to date is that? If somebody left military service, 4 or 5 months ago, would that be in there yet?
4 or 5 months ago is going to be pushing it.
Okay.
I'll say if the person's been in the last 6 months, it'll probably already be in the National Archives because it takes time, for the out processing and everything for it to go through the Personnel Center, the National Personnel Records Center,
Right.
to be added to the archives. So if the person just got out, it might be a little harder to get. You might have to wait for the records for a while. But here's what's supposed to happen, Ramesh. As soon as we're processed out, those records are supposed to be packed up and sent to the personnel center, and they supposed to, in a short amount of time, send them to the National Archives. But
Hmm.
now when I say National Archives, it is the National Personnel Records Center. So those records should be sent there right away. They have records going back pre World War One. Well, I'll tell you about that. There are about 18 million records missing, and I'll get to that in just a second. But
Right.
they have those records going back before World War One, so you can get the records. But you brought up an interesting point. If the person got out 3 or 4 months ago, you might need to wait for those records to catch up at the National
Okay.
Personnel Records Center. And by the way, they do a lot of this stuff still by paper because
Okay.
your
Yeah.
military records are still going to be paper records. So those paper records have to catch up.
I was years ago. I was in Alabama on a case, and I went to Montgomery, where they had a place called Air University, and
Yes.
there was a huge. I don't know if that's still part of the system, but there was a huge center of military records there, and I actually found records from World War II that just like knocked me out of my chair. That there was so many of them. It was amazing.
Yes. Yes. If you want to, now ancestry.com and all those, they're going back and getting those kind of records to put into their system. And let me tell you, you can get an entire person's history, at least military history, as you said, going back to World War II and World War One. Now,
Right.
let me preface this. There was a fire in 1973,
Hmm.
and they lost about 18 million records. But what they do is that they're able to find records from different places, and kind of reconstitute some of the records if you needed to get records that were, that was lost, that were stored there before 1973. So again,
That's a
18.
huge. That's a huge undertaking.
That is a huge undertaking, and that's a
Yeah.
lot of people. I mean, in the big scheme of things, I told you there's 100 million records. It's only 18 million, but that 18 million could be one that you're looking for,
Sure. Of
unfortunately.
course.
All right.
Right.
So if you want to find records, I want to get to the types of military records that you have, right? Now you
Hmm.
have World War One to present. You mentioned World War Two records, so you can find the veterans' military service records from World War One to present, again from that National Personnel Records Center, and they house a lot of different types of records, including your official military personnel file, and that's what's important. That official military personnel file has everything that service member did or had in the military. And sometimes there's even the medical records as well. But now we're talking about HIPAA requests and things like that.
Hmm.
And that file, if you can get your hands on that official military personnel file, it actually has the DD-214 on it. And that would show the veteran service history again, enlistments, appointment dates, separation dates, duty stations, even the trainings and qualifications that that person might have. Let's say that person is going for a job and you're doing the background investigation as the investigator, and they say they attended certain schools and you want to verify that. Well, you can verify that from that personnel record that you can get your hands on. So that's something that's going to be helpful for you. Now, if it's before World War I, you can find those older military records from the National Archives in Washington D.C. So now you're going to have to write them and do a different type of request to get the records sent to you from Washington D.C. You can actually do that online though. There's a form called a Standard Form 180 that folks can use, or they can just simply write a letter and get the information from the National Archives in D.C.
Now, I'm assuming that, much like in law enforcement, if this person is under some sort of investigation by the military or the federal government, you're not going to be able to get those details. And I think people should know that.
Yes, you did mention if they're under investigation. Is that correct?
Right. If it's an active
Yes,
investigation.
by the military or by the federal government. Yes, you're not going to be get those. And even if you got them through FOIA, I used to do this. They're going to be
Hmm.
redacted. So you're
Right.
not going to be able to pull a lot of information out of there. But again, what's valuable that we talked about before is let's say you have a case. Let's just say this person now is involved with a rape or something like that, and you're doing a rape investigation, sexual assault. Maybe you want to look at the records and see what their court martial records before had they had the same type of behavior when they're in the military. So you get your
Sure.
hands
Yeah.
on that, and you can prove, hey, this guy has done this type of thing before, so that could be valuable to you,
You
right?
mentioned photographs, Derek. So
Hmm.
what would these be photographs of? Are these like official photographs that maybe supervisory personnel are taking out in the field, or what are those?
No, they're going to be usually like my official Navy photograph or Army photograph when I went through basic training. When we go through basic training, all of us take a photograph.
Right.
So that picture goes in our file. There might be photographs as to when we made NCO, we went through the NCO Academy or certain schools. They take official photographs. So it's going to be the official photographs. It won't be just random photographs of when I was performing my duty out in the field, doing field operations or something like that. They usually don't put those in the personnel file. So they're going to be official photos.
I got it. But
Mhm.
those aren't like the average PI could get that, right? If they requested the personnel file and be able to get that photograph from.
Yes, because it'll be a part of that official record that they will send you.
Right. So investigators out there, if you're dealing with somebody and they say, we don't have any photographs of them, ask if they're in the military, and that could be your foot in the door. Right.
And again, now it's easier for that veteran or the next of kin to get the record. But if you know this as an investigator, if you're not next of kin and you don't have a written agreement from the veteran to allow you to get that information, you're only going to be able to get limited information about
Uh huh.
non-archival records, without the consent of that person. But still, there could be valuable certain information in there that you can
Okay.
use. Yeah, I want to talk about one other thing too. So I want to talk
Okay.
about FOIA requests. So we talked about getting the records through official means to going through the National Archives at archives.gov. But you can also do a FOIA request. And a FOIA request is a little bit different than going through National Archives. Now with National Archives, again, you don't have to pay. It's easier to get, that information. But you can put in for a FOIA request. And the FOIA request is the Freedom of Information Act. And it does apply to military records. Okay. And it allows all citizens, investigators, anybody to request access to federal agency records. And these records are going to be considered federal agency records. Now, agencies cannot disclose any information that's part of what we call FOIA exemptions, like classified information regarding some type of national security job they might have had in the military, or if it's about the military's internal practices or something like that. You're probably not going to be able to get that. But you will be able to still get some of that information I gave you about names, salaries, service numbers, and all of that type of
Yeah,
stuff.
that's very valuable
Right?
stuff.
And those are, oh yeah, it still could be valuable to you. So how do you file a Freedom of Information Act request? And this is again, the records are going to come from the National Personal Record Center. It's the same thing. They hold all the military records, and you just have to go on and submit a FOIA request form. And that's something that you can actually start online. Now they want you to fill it out, so you can start it online. You got to print it out, and then you got to
Uh-huh.
file it. All right, and you get the standard request form. You complete it, and then you send it to the National Personnel Record Center. And in it, there's a few things you have to have. And investigators, you want to write this down. You just need the veteran's name. You need their date and place of birth. If you have it, a service number or a social security number. If you don't, that's okay. Branch of service that person was in. If you can kind of figure out the dates of service to help them find it, and if they're deceased, obituary or a copy of the death certificate or something like that, you get that and you send that FOIA request out. And regardless of how you do it, whether it's online or whether it's paper, they want you to send it via fax or they want you to
Okay.
mail it to them. Okay, and you send that request in, and they're going to send you the record. So the FOIA request again is another way that you can do it. You send it to the National Personnel Record Center, and again, that's in St. Louis, Missouri. You can look it up, but if you send it to the Military Personnel Records section, and the address is One Archive Drive, but you can find that if you do a simple search on the internet. Now, also, it's not going to cost you anything to do it. Now, I let me preface that if they have to spend a lot of time looking for the record or are going through a lot of paperwork, they will write you or call you and ask you for a nominal
Sure.
fee
Yeah,
to
just like
do
a
that.
police department's going to do. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true because the police department kind of do the same thing. They won't charge you unless there's a lot of work involved. All right. Now, here's the good thing about it. They have to respond to your FOIA request within a certain amount of days. So that National Personal Record Center has 10 days to respond. Of course, the response time can vary depending on the request complexity and all that. But usually within 10 days, they got to tell you something. And I used to do FOIA requests, so it might be simply tell you in 10 days, I need more time. But they have to give you some type of response within that 10 days. Now, they receive like 4 to 5,000 requests every single day. So there could be some delays, and there have been some delays due to COVID as well. So again, I told you when we started, Ramesh, that there's not a lot of ways to get military records. So those are the two ways: going through the archives, National Archives, archives.gov, or doing a FOIA request are pretty much the basic two ways for an investigator or any person to be able to get access to those records.
Yeah.
By the way, being a licensed private investigator don't give you any particular status that's going to allow you to get this faster or easier than anybody else.
That's right.
You
Yeah. I
probably
mean,
know that.
we covered that in an earlier episode for some of the new or younger investigators out there, or some of them that are interns. There's no authority involved with that license. Derek, in this podcast, it's all about value content for the listeners to help people get better at what they do. And today you have provided valuable content with flying colors, man. And I really, really appreciate all of your knowledge and your expertise that you spent time to share with us today.
I appreciate that. And I want to leave you with this. Your show is called Nothing But the Truth. And if you want to know the truth about people who served in the military, then, first of all, that civilian should go out and hire a private investigator to find out the truth. Because through that investigator, they're going to take his or her time. They're going to put in a lot of effort to get to the truth. And they're going to provide that person with an accurate and honest picture of that service of that soldier. So if you need to request military records, don't try it on your own. Instead, hire a good private investigator to help you out with that.
Yeah,
And that's
love
what I
that.
want to end with. All right.
That's great, man. That's really great because, like I said, it's a big world out there for new investigators, and for clients, right? They need to know how to do it. But
Absolutely.
once again, Derek, thank you so much for spending time. You've got a busy schedule, man. There's a million things that you do. You were telling me about, so I know your time is valuable, and you spent it here on Nothing But the Truth, and I really do appreciate that, and I know our listeners will too.
My pleasure. Anytime, Ramesh.
You take care, Derek. We'll
All
talk again soon. Derek A. Smith. That was some really good stuff, wasn't it? There was a lot of stuff in there I never really knew because it's not often that you go after military records, but now that we have a clear understanding of what to do and what we can hopefully get from it, this kind of provides some depth to our skill sets when it comes to doing background checks or even skip traces. So a great big thank you to Derek Smith. Hey, have you ever listened to this podcast or another podcast and thought to yourself that you would really like to do that? Well, I was in the same boat at one time, and it was Buzzsprout that really got me started. Buzzsprout's super easy to use. They have a great team of tech support people that I've never even used because it's so simple. You can figure everything out on your own. It's very, very self-instructive and intuitive. The best part about this is if you get set up with one of their paid plans, you get a $20 Amazon gift card. So that's a nice little incentive. Plus, you'll be supporting our show, which is also a great incentive, at least from our end. So look at Buzzsprout. There's over 100,000 podcasters out there today using Buzzsprout. Once you start using it, you'll see why. Very easy to set up and get started, and they'll get you listed on all the major podcast sites. So check it out, buzzsprout.com, buzzsprout.com. That does it for this episode. Please don't forget, go to Amazon.com, pick up a copy of the 10 must-haves to be a great detective. This will be a great supplement to your listening of this podcast. Thanks so much for being a listener. Don't forget, you can always choose to support the show by going to patreon.com/detectiverom and learning the different ways that you can be a patron of the show and get some really cool benefits. We'll talk about those in the next episode. In the meantime, you guys take care of yourselves. Don't forget, always put your best foot forward, and don't forget to work on your other foot. We'll see you next time.